Okay, we are recording. How does technology and the beginnings of the internet inform the world of the play?
So my friend taught me about this term. It's called digital native, and it's for the people around my age group who genuinely don't remember a time where technology didn't exist. Like I was born in 1999, so I really grew up with internet, with digital. It's just what I know. I don't know a world before that. So I was very interested in this sort of transitional period of, I'd say late 90s, early 2000s of sort of switching from the analytical or analog world to the digital world. It's sort of a historical moment at this point because of how far play. I was thinking that sort of disconnect of information and experiences in technology in the different age groups and demographics could really create tension and conflict between characters. So I did want to take advantage of that because it's hard for us to even imagine a time where people had never even been on a computer before. But this period, there were people who genuinely didn't know how the internet worked. So I thought that could create a really cool world to sort of look at now, today.
That's great. No, I remember reading this play for the first time and I was like, oh my gosh, because I graduated high school in 2004. So I was just in that cusp and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so and then meeting you, you're a bit younger than me. And I was like, it's just fascinating to meet somebody who's
it really
what is this time? Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't that long of a time and so much change. So I think those years are really interesting.
Yeah, they were. All right. What can you tell us about the power structures in femininity as it pertains to the play?
Yeah, so I sort of grew up with these conflicting narratives of feminism. I was experiencing the definitions of Western feminism with my friends and in school and just my environment. But then I was looking at other parts of the world and, my family where I come from, and their definition of feminism and female empowerment looked and sounded very different. Specifically within the Muslim community, what it means to be an empowered woman, I saw as just a different definition than what I was seeing here. So I wanted to address this, and I wanted to talk about how Sonia, my character, is exploring her own femininity, but because of the way the world sort of perceives her, she's sort of trapped in who she's allowed to be. And I think this comes from, I was also thinking about this idea that I hear a lot that Muslim women sort of need saving. And that's what I wanted to address, because even people who I would consider allies or woke, whatever you want to call it, they still don't really know how to talk about Muslim women or the hijab or anything like that. It's always sort of uncomfortable for people here to talk about. So like I said, Sonia's exploring her femininity, but she sort of feels trapped. And I think that entrapment and the suppression comes from multiple places, but I too often hear that the culture and even Islam in general is the sole blame for that. Hence that idea of them needing a savior. But I don't think that's the entire story. I think it's much more complicated. I think feminism, you need to consider intersectionality and how a woman's expression of her empowerment can look and feel different across cultures. And there isn't a problem with that. It's instead of just thinking about it in one way, I wanted this play to sort of have these two women who have such different lives, but are both empowered women in their own right.
That's great. Awesome. Okay, we kind of touched on this one a little bit, but why is it important to set this particular story in 2004?
I think there's a few reasons. I'd say the first, for a very selfish reason, is I just love the aesthetics of the early 2000s. I think, in my humble opinion, it is the pinnacle of pop culture. It was just very uninhibited in the way that like fashion and music and films were like made, and just the way we sort of expressed ourselves. I think we weren't self-aware in the way that we are now, and like being afraid of like being cringy or being like too much. Like, I feel like just looking back, that wasn't a thing back then.
Yeah.
And I think that's really cool. And another reason, like I touched on earlier, is technology. I think that's a really big part of this play, and something that I think this time period is really cool to explore. And finally, I did want this to be in that direct post 9/11 world, where like Muslims were so clearly targeted in this country and around the world. I'd say we're better at sort of hiding it now, but it's still everywhere. I did just try to take that collective experience of the community and boil it into like one situation and one woman trying to just get through her life by being a Muslim hijabi woman. So that is just the beginning of the conversation, obviously, but I think those stories are really important to hear, because we didn't want to hear those stories back then, and I think it's important to sort of touch on it now.
Great. All right, last question. Where did the name Dried Fruit come from?
So I'm very bad with titles. It's my least favorite part of writing, because I just think there's like so much weight to it, and that really stresses me out, because I'm like, I don't know what the best title is. So if I'm being completely frank, Dried Fruit just sort of came to me. And I thought, oh, that could be a cool name for this. I could make up this whole like analytical why I thought it would be a good idea, but that just wouldn't be true.
Great.
It really just came to me. So
I love that. Yeah, that's wonderful. Okay. Thank you very much.